Welcome to another episode of Don't Call It Small. I'm your host, Natasha Foreman. If you don't know me and you have no clue what this podcast is all about, let me share a bit. I'm the CEO of Foreman Associates LLC, and Don't Call It Small is where we talk all things business, share tips and news that you can use, and highlight the people and ideas behind the products and services that we buy. To learn more about our team, please visit foremanllc.com. Hello everyone, another beautiful July day. I hope that you are doing well and you're embracing your blessings. I have a great interview in store for all of you with someone that I've shared with you on previous episodes. And I can't wait to reintroduce him to you. Some of you may not even know who I'm referring to, so this will be the first time you've ever heard of him. But I look forward to this conversation that we're about to have. Let's see something. So it is both an honor and a privilege to have this guest, the next guest that I have on our Don't Call It Small business podcast. I have shared some information about him in previous episodes, as I said earlier. He was enlisted in the U.S. Air Force in 1975. He retired in 94 at the rank of major. He held command positions in 5 separate assignments. He was recognized during his service as Company Grade Officer of the Year, Maxwell Air Force Base, and Outstanding Airman of the Year at Scott Air Force Base. Following retirement, he earned his master's degree in business administration and a PhD in organization and management. He held positions at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, Federal Aviation Administration, several corporate management positions, a community action agency, and taught at several colleges and universities, including graduate courses at the Forbes School of Business. His name is Dr. Steve Woodsmall. He's my friend and colleague. As I said previous episodes, we were classmates in our doctoral program, and we have remained in contact for many years. What else? Oh, there's other things I want to share. How active he's been in the Transylvania community of North Carolina. He served as executive director for the Vision Transylvania Leadership Program. He's on their county planning board. He's conducted numerous seminars for their Chamber of Commerce. He's a former NCAA women's college basketball official. He served as referee for high school basketball teams. 4 children, 6 grandchildren and counting. And he resides with his wife, his amazing wife, in North Carolina. He wrote a book in 2011. I read it twice, probably 3 times. And I shared it with everyone I knew. I have also shared it with my students. It's called It Beats Eating Lizards, Lessons Learned in Life and Leadership. So we're going to talk about that today, as well as some other things. But you can get that book on Amazon and with other retailers. You will love this book, and you will share it just like I did. And I'll let Steve be able to share about the collection of true stories that are illustrated in the lessons that he shared in his book. And so with that, without further delay, welcome, Steve, formally to this podcast. Thank you for joining me today.
Great to be here. Looking forward to talking to you.
I'm really excited. So what have you been up to? Because, I had shared what you were doing in North Carolina politically for the past 2 years. So what is on Steve Woodsmall's plate as of today?
Well, I'm happy to say that I don't have to campaign right now, which is a good thing. As you know, we ran for Congress, lost in the primary. That's another story. But I'm pretty much retired right now. I'm trying to get my golf game back into shape, and I'm doing some work around the house and kind of just chilling out and trying to figure out what my next adventure is going to be.
So what were some of the things that you wanted to be able to address and help bring some positive change to in the state of North Carolina?
Well, my main issues were, and not just for North Carolina, but for the country. Number one, and my primary issue that I ran on was getting the money out of politics and overturning the Citizens United ruling. Because to me, that, as a management professional, and you know this, you have to go to the root cause of the problem. And the root cause for so many problems that we have in this country, particularly in the political arena, is the influence of money. So you've got the dark money, you've got the unlimited political contributions, you've got people who vote for candidates based strictly on how much money they've raised, which is no indication of viability in an election. And until we fix that problem, which I think is the root cause of a lot of our issues, I don't think we're going to fix many of the issues that we need to really work on, like the environment, like education, like universal single-payer health care, like the gun issue because of the influence of money. So that's number one, first and foremost. And then, of course, I ran on the gun issue, banning assault weapons. I ran on universal single-payer health care, which, again, we can't get to because of the influence of money. And basically restoring integrity back to the political process. We have too many people in politics now that are not in it for the right reason. And, quite frankly, as I used to tell people on the campaign trail, this is not the America that I signed up for years ago, and we need to get back to where we should be as a country.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So looking at that and now in this cloud of COVID-19 and one of the things that you stand very strong on, and the things that what I gravitated towards you as a colleague and as a friend is your principles and your character as a leader. And so when we look at the leadership examples throughout this country, what are you seeing when as you're looking through your lens? What are you seeing on not just on the local and state level and the federal level, but but beyond, like globally? What are we seeing, all the different dynamics that is at play?
Well, I think for the most part we're seeing a lack of leadership, and there are isolated instances of, particularly with respect to the coronavirus, where countries have handled that well, and they've come out on the other side of it for the most part, as opposed to what's happening in this country, where you have people in government, both at the state levels, local levels, and in D.C., who amazingly don't follow the science. And I just cannot understand the reason for doing that. And when you don't follow the science and listen to the experts, you end up with what we have right now, which is a pandemic in this country. We have, I think we're up close to 140,000 deaths. The spike is still going up. It's going to get worse this fall. We have, in North Carolina, our governor has passed a mandate statewide for wearing masks and limiting public groupings of more than 10 and that sort of thing. And people are rebelling against that like it's a political thing. And it's just amazing to me that people look at a serious health issue as something political, because it's not. And that gets into the lack of leadership in terms of just focusing on facts, focusing on science, and doing the right thing for the people that you're supposed to represent, and not necessarily the thing that you think is going to get you elected or reelected. So we have people, leadership is about service, leadership is about positively influencing people toward a common goal. It's not about raising your own stock or making sure you get reelected or making sure you're popular in the polls and that sort of thing. And so we've lost that. We've lost that, I think, primarily due to the two-party system, and it's turned into us against them from either side, and it should be, let's work together to do what's in the best interest of the people in this country, and we don't have very many people in Washington that are willing to do that now, and that has led us where we are.
Mm-hmm. So with the book, like I said, the book that it beats eating lizards, and the different quotes that I have snatched from that and given you credit for in my classes and in my regular conversation, share with those, because some people will be like, what? It beats eating lizards? Like, what is he talking about? Share, because I remember when you first sent it to me, you're like, here's my book, it's done. And I'm like, lizards? What in the world? I had to just read it just to figure out what in the world is he talking about, some lizards. So share what the book is all about, and if there's anything else that you've released recently or that you're about to release, please share that as well.
Well, it was just, that's something that I always kind of wanted to do was throughout my life and my Air Force career, and then my professional career thereafter, just stuff happens. Neat little things happen that you can learn from. And I'm a big proponent, as I know you are, of lifelong learning. You're never too old to learn. You're never too old to get better. You're never too old to expand your horizons. And so if you're aware of that, you can look at situations or things that happen and take lessons from those things. And so the book is just really a collection of some things that happened either in my personal life or in my professional life that kind of illustrate a lesson to be learned. And in fact, I've got some notes. I'm thinking about doing a sequel to that too, because it was really fun writing that. It made me go back and reflect on a lot of things, and I think we may be coming out with another one in the next year or so. But it's really just a collection of little short stories that I experienced personally, and what one can learn from those.
I love
if you're open to it.
I love it. And I'm really excited when you just said you've got some notes looking at a sequel to. I'm excited because there's so much, in your story. And in all the different times I've spoken with you, I'm like, gosh, okay, well, I've still got these questions, right? I still have all these questions about Steve and in ways in which Steve operates and how he thinks and how he approaches certain circumstances, and what parts of that is from your military experience versus what parts are from just personal life and what you've just pieced together. So for you, in your years in the Air Force, what was your takeaway from that, and how did you apply what you learned to not only be the man you are personally, but professionally and in the community? Like, what all of those things that you weave together?
Well, probably my number one takeaway, I went in the Air Force when I was 19, pretty much right out of high school. And so that informed a lot of my thinking as I was, going through the military experience and getting a little older and a little bit wiser, and experiencing things that, on a small farm in rural southern Indiana, one doesn't have exposure to. So you go from a town of 800 in southern Indiana to the next day you're in the Air Force and you're in a room with 50 beds, and the other 49 people in that room, very few of them look, act, think, or sound like you do. And so you're thrown into that situation for 8 weeks, and you have to get along. You have to work together. So it's really a shot between the eyes to be thrown into that situation and realize the importance of looking at people for not what they are, but who they are and what they can do. And that's kind of been my focus from that point on. I didn't know anything about leadership when I went in the Air Force. I ended up being selected as a squad leader in basic training. I don't know why. I guess they saw something in me. But my squad always did the best, and I was the easiest squad leader because I didn't make my guys stay in the dorm and shine their shoes and make their beds. I just said, look, I'm in this with you guys. I'm just going to treat you like I'd want to be treated. Do what you need to do. You know what the expectations are. As long as we're not getting in trouble, and the training instructor's not yelling at me for what you guys are doing, let's just try to get through this and have some fun at it and work together. And we always did the best on the inspections. We always did the best on drill. And somebody told the TI that it was because of our squad leader, and I'm like, okay, I think that's cool, but I don't know why that happened. And I think it just came down to common sense of, be positive, treat people like you want to be treated, and give them the opportunity to respond. And that's something that I have really failed to notice in a lot of places outside the military is managers and leaders always fail to assume positive intent. Mm-hmm. They immediately, when there's a problem, they look to blame someone. They look to question somebody's motivation for doing something. They tend not to trust employees or coworkers or managers. And that's generally a recipe for failure because I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt the first time. What happened here? Let's talk about it. As Covey says, let me try to understand first what happened here, and then let me seek for you to understand my perspective and why this might be an issue that we need to look at. And so always assume positive intent, and always try to make sure that people understand where you're trying to go and where they need to go to help you get there. And that's basically what leadership is. It's just amazing. And I worked with a lot of really good leaders in the military. I had some bad ones. I had some really bad ones too. But, going back to the original premise, you can learn a lot from working with a great leader. You can also learn a lot when you work with a bad leader because you learn a lot about what not to do. And so when you're in that situation, take notes either way and, practice the things that work for you that you see in a good leader and avoid the things that you see poor leaders do, and learn something from them too.
Why do you think that some people, and I think I forgot what it was, and it could have been one of the classes that we had taken where they had shared a Harvard study about, and it was twofold. Number one, it was sharing that on average, managers are in a management position for roughly 10 years before they receive formal management training. And then on the split of that research, they had shared how managers that could recall bad leaders and managers in their life as they were coming up and remembering the how they were mistreated, but how ironically they were exhibiting the same types of behaviors towards their team members, even though they despised it in the previous leadership that had guided them. Why do you think we have a tendency to repeat that? Like we continue the cycle, even though we didn't like it ourselves, the mistreatment ourselves?
Well, I think because it's just easier. People, I think, and I'm getting into, theory X and Y here, but I think people are generally lazy at this point. And I didn't used to think that. I used to be on the other end of that spectrum, but I've, in the last several years, and I don't know if it's a reflection of society, if it's a reflection of just people being overwhelmed with everything that's going on, but people don't want to think. And people don't want to learn, and they don't want to get better. And so they just fall back on what they know, not from training or not from education, but just what they've seen, and they model that and don't understand that, they're doing the same things that they didn't like when their boss did it to them. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. I think it's just a lack of effort to try to learn how to do better. as long as you're getting the short-term results, then we're going to stick with what is working right now. We don't think long-term enough. We don't think about our piece of the puzzle and its impact on the greater system. And I just don't understand that. I don't know any other way that you can do it and still get by, but it happens, and it's just generally both in government and both in the private sector. It's just a lack of accountability. It seems like to me, and I just don't understand how we got to that place.
Yeah, I was having breakfast the other day in Philadelphia, and I was talking to a business owner, and so there was other people at the breakfast, and I said that he was talking about something, and what it reflected in me is that I've noticed that we have a tendency nowadays we're so quick to retweet, repost, to quickly forward information that we're not reading anything. We just see a headline. And I feel like that's how a lot of us are operating. We're not even digging deep. There's no critical thinking. There's nothing. I'm not going to even.
Exactly.
And it's just so sad because there's so much misinformation just being spread when we look at social media. Take out, even with that equation out, you're still having the one-on-one interactions with people. And it's sad because I'm literally, that's the reason why I says, I can't wait. When I had the conversation with the guy, I says, I can't wait when I get to talk to Steve, because it's lazy. People are like, okay, I'll read the first paragraph, or if they do that, I read the headline. And like the ones that get me all the time are when people are reposting the satire websites and they don't realize it. And then
I know. I know. And and I heard somebody say people look for microwave solutions to crock-pot problems or something like that. We just want to get it over with and move on to the next thing. We have a short attention span. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And I preach this all the time. It's a lack of critical thinking. I used to beat that into my students at the college I taught at, because in a business program, one of the things that we really stress in the business program is, look, you're going to take accounting classes, you're going to take management classes, leadership, strategic planning, critical thinking, all these different courses. Business problems and mid-level and high-level management problems are not something that you can Google the answer to. So because there's so many different factors that come into play, and because of the systemic nature of organizations, you have to understand what happens at point A is going to affect something at point D, and what happens over in another department, and so on and so forth. You can't operate in a vacuum, and you can't just Google the answer to this business problem. You've got to look at all the available information. You've got to consider the implications. You've got to figure out what the consequences are going to be, what the impact is going to be on other people. Do you need their help or not? Do you need their involvement or not? And that's hard work. Mm-hmm. You can't just pull up your phone and find out the answer to this problem. It doesn't work that way. And by the way, since I'm speaking about systems, I will tell you, yes, what else I was doing. I forgot to mention, in November, I'm doing a TED-Talk.
Yes.
For, there's a regional TEDx conference here in Lake Junaluska, Western North Carolina, and I'm doing one on, I wanted to do one on systems thinking, and they convinced me to do one on a systems approach to the coronavirus. So we're going to look at what's happened during this whole coronavirus pandemic, and what was done and not done from a system standpoint, and what lessons we can learn from that, and what we need to do going forward. So I'm really excited about that one.
I'm excited too. So that means I can't try to get the scoop on, because that was one of my questions, is looking at the challenges and opportunities that business leaders, and maybe I can just help you, or you can just zoom in on that for our conversation. What business leaders need to focus on as we face COVID-19 and all these things? that was something else that came up in one of the conversations that I had during my trip is what do businesses do now? Like we're in this, and it's not like, oh, it's going to be over tomorrow. So, as you're looking at this from the multi lenses that you have worn and that you do wear, what are some of the opportunities and what are some of the challenges that you see that we're going to be facing now and still in the future?
With regard to the coronavirus, or just in general?
Because, right now we're in this, and I think that, like as I had shared, was that one of the biggest telling things that I've noticed from this pandemic is that a lot of businesses, big, small, medium, didn't matter their size, did not actually plan ever for a crisis to happen, right? Because we see how quickly everyone just freaked out, even the large companies. No one who actually has ever planned for a crisis. And I remember that, and as no matter if you go to SBA's website or you go and you sit in someone's workshop or you go on someone's YouTube, we're always telling people when they're going to start a business, make sure you have 12 to 18 months of money that you can survive off of, in that startup phase, because, it's going to be rough and most, we go through all these numbers, 5 to 7 years, most businesses fail. But then we look at these companies that have been in existence for a long time, and they didn't even have, 12 to 18 months of money, of resources to be able to keep their businesses running at, 100% or even 90%. So this has been I feel like the covers have been pulled back, and we're actually seeing what's really happening. And the fact is that people aren't as well built and structured as they perceive to be, because when you see hotels go out of business in 2 months, that is like, whoa.
Yes. Well, we often say when we talk about business, we talk about how well Japan does versus the United States. And one of the things that I always tell my students was Japanese managers versus American managers. So we are short-term thinkers. We're focused on the next quarter. We're focused on the bottom line. We're looking at annual performance ratings. We're looking at quarterly reports. We're looking at today's stock price. So American managers focus on the next quarter. Japanese managers focus on the next quarter century.
Mm.
And that's what happens. Long-range strategic systems planning to allow for things like this. We Americans are great deniers. Well, that never happened here. That will never happen here. Or it will, you heard Trump say when the COVID-19 had first come out, well, it's going to go away in April because it's going to get warm and it'll just die.
Yeah.
Well, everybody knew that was not true. And yet, here you have the President of the United States. I just saw a compilation today, the CNN crowd, of all the things that he said that were just flat wrong. And nobody seems to call him on it. And he's got experts that he won't listen to. It's just I can't get my hand around. I can't get my head around it. It's just unbelievable that we don't have forward thinkers and we don't plan for these kinds of emergencies. Now, that having been said, the Obama administration did in fact have a plan for a global pandemic, despite what Trump says, and so they elected. I guess they threw it away. It's what they said in the news. They just tore it up and threw it away because Obama did it. But they had a roadmap for what to do in case of a global pandemic, and they had war gamed it out. And the new administration chose not to look at it. So here we are, and now even today, with the levels that we're at, the leadership is still saying, well, it's going to go away. We should make the kids go back to school. We should let the businesses open, and they have to make a living. And I'm not going to wear my mask because you're violating my civil rights, and it's become a political. Wearing a mask is a political thing.
Yeah.
Instead of a health thing. I mean, it's really, as some of my friends around here say, it's really an IQ test. So you can tell when you go out who has common sense and who doesn't. But again, it's denial. People just deny it, and I cannot understand it. I really thought human beings were smarter than that, but I guess they're doing their best to prove me wrong every day.
Well, I know yesterday I had a lively debate where someone was, once again, they were regurgitating, well, look about how many people die from the flu, and think about it, the numbers that we get from hospitals are only based on who goes to the hospital. Think about how many people have the flu that never go to the hospital. And I said, that's the same position that we took with HIV and AIDS in the 80s and 90s. Like,
yep.
Same
Absolutely.
way. Until it hit home, until a family member, got it, until, then all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is serious. And it's so weird.
Yes.
And so I feel like that's how people are when it comes to, business and other matters, that we can see something happen to someone else's company, and then we say, well, that couldn't happen to mine. And I'm like, well, why couldn't it? If you're doing the exact same thing or not doing the, you know what I mean? Like, why couldn't it? It is really baffling, I think. And I think I agree with the whole deniability. It's easier to deny. Have you read the book Hillbilly Elegy by, his last name is Van?
No, but it's actually on my list. It's actually on my list to read.
I read it. Oh my gosh, I love that book. I think I'm going to read it again.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, when you read it, I just want you to just give me a call so we can sit back.
Okay, I will.
It is an amazing book, and the audiobook is actually read by the author, so it really helps it just feels like you're having a conversation with him. So I love that one. I love that option too. But once you read
that's on my.
Okay.
I don't have that one yet, but I have two of Meacham's books, and I've got the Doris Kearns Goodwin book on presidential leadership, and I've got Hillbilly Elegy on my list to read, and then I also just for fun I have one on how crows communicate.
What? What's that? What is that? I've got to see what that is about.
Yeah, it is pretty interesting.
That's something that just came to my mind. I need to ask people when they're on here. I think I steer away from asking people what books they're reading, because I always feel like someone's going to say, what books?
Yes, exactly. The Sarah Palin syndrome. What do you read? Well,
what does my Twitter feed
about
count?
What? Oh my God.
So, what? So, in what ways do you think we can, as a nation, heal? And it's so many. I think because there's so many things that are going on. We've got racial tensions. We've got economic tensions. We have economic tensions that are trying to point as though they're racial. We have things that are going on with, sexism. We have things with people intentionally destroying our environment. There's just so much crap that is happening in our country at the exact same time. And it's like, we're trying to find ways to put Band-Aids on everything so we can breathe. But, how do we actually deal with things if it's like literally floodgates? Like, as soon as you get to one, another one is just bursting back open. Like, how do we redesign? Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. The two-party system, this is I hate it. It's crap. Like, it is literally us. It's like it's sick. It's like a sickness. Like, we've got it's gross. So how do we deal with all these Band-Aids popping off of this dam that keeps breaking and is all over the place? How do we address these things? Because no one wants to take accountability. Everyone wants to blame it on the last administration, on the last governor, on the last whatever. Like, How do we deal with this crap?
Well, vote, first of all.
Okay.
Now that sounds like a simplistic answer, and that's not the catch-all, because one of the other things I ran on was, your vote matters, but in many cases it doesn't matter, because we've got a broken electoral process. We need to get rid of the electoral college. We need to get rid of gerrymandering. We need to get rid of all this money in politics, and then then we can get people in these positions who are in it for the right reason and want to do the right thing. One of the first lessons I learned in the military was, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing to sit there and bitch and moan about how bad things are, but if you're not helping do something about it, you in fact are part of the problem yourself. So the other thing you can do besides vote is get off your ass and do something yourself. Mm-hmm. Because there's a big difference between saying something must be done versus I need to do something. Mm. What can I do? What can I do to help be a part of the solution? Because if you're not trying to fix it, you then are part of the problem. And too many people are just content to sit back and complain and say, well, there's nothing I can do, or it's politics, or it's money, or it's this. Well, yeah, but what can you do? We all have our own personal sphere of influence. You can do something within that sphere of influence to make conditions better for your family, for your community, for yourself, whatever the case might be. But do something. And if everybody does a little bit, you'd be amazed how far we can go when you throw all that together. Yeah. Systemically, it's going to take a major shift in our political system. And again, we've got to get the money out, because you've got people in Congress that vote based on who gives them the money, and not on what is right and what makes sense. And that's why we can't have universal single-payer health care. That's why we can't fix the gun problem. That's why we can't fix the environmental issues. I could go on down the line. Until we fix that, I think we're totally screwed, bottom line. But we've got to vote for people who are willing to get in there and do the right thing. And as I used to tell people, spend all your time actually doing the job instead of trying to keep your job.
And we have a lot of people trying to keep a job or trying to catapult themselves to the next job.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, we definitely do. As you were talking, I was sitting here thinking, and it made me think about this conversation where, sometimes we get so consumed by the big picture that we don't, they talk about you have to eat the elephant in small pieces. I think some people get consumed by the elephant. And
absolutely.
And so I was talking to someone, I was talking to this group, and I was talking about, if we focused on, number one, our household first, because if there's dysfunction there, you really can't do much help in, creating function elsewhere. But, and then what was really interesting is that how many of us don't even know our neighbors. So how could you possibly do anything to do uplift in your community if you don't even know your neighbors?
Yes.
And so it's starting at home and then branching outward. And I think that if people broke it down into smaller pieces, because I think, because some folks, I always hear people say, oh, I'm going to start this nonprofit. And in their mind, it's going to be a global nonprofit overnight. And I was like, oh, I think you really need to learn.
Yeah.
The hard truth about this whole process.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, it's really interesting. So there was something else that I wanted to discuss with you, looking at your vision. So let's say you had a chance to be with Doc on Back to the Future, and you had a chance to look forward 5 to 10 years. What's your outlook for us as a nation 5 to 10 years from now? Where do you see us?
Well, I'm not optimistic. I always try to paint a somewhat positive picture down the road, but things are so volatile right now. Who knows? Mm-hmm. When you have just as an example, this, I saw a poll yesterday, I think 32% of the people in this poll still support Trump as president, for example. Now, forget Republican, Democrat. I'm not even worried about all that. But if you, given all that's happened in the last 3.5 years, if you still think that a President Trump is what this country needs, and there's 32% of the people out there that feel that way, we are screwed. Mm-hmm. Because it goes back to the critical thinking again. And the problem is, as you said, they look at social media, or they parrot what they hear on Fox News, and there's no thought as to the reality of it, or even, and that 32% are going to vote for people who are not in their best interest. Mm-hmm. Because Fox News told them to, for example. And there are a lot, and I'm not trying to turn this into a political thing, because there are a lot of people in the Democratic Party who are a little bit the same way. If it's Democratic, it's good. If it's Republican, it's bad. No, you've got to look at the individual. You've got to look at each issue on its own, and what's the impact on the greater good for everybody in the society. And people don't want to do that because it's too damn hard.
Yes.
So they withdraw. It's all about what's in it for me, and there's so much crap floating around out there that's just too overwhelming, so I'm just going to pull back into my shell, and I'm going to live my life, and I'm not going to worry about the rest of it, because there's nothing I can do anyway. Mm-hmm. And more people are doing that, and that's how we get where we are. So 5 to 10 years, I don't know. Hopefully we'll have a new presidential administration. Hopefully we'll have a Democratic Senate. And again, I'm not super fired up about the Democrats right now either, to be honest with you. I've talked to a Democratic state senator friend of mine here in North Carolina, and we're both thinking about going down affiliated, just because the whole party politic thing has just gotten out of control on both sides. And it's become all about loyalty to the party and not really what's in the best interest of the constituents. And that's what the founding fathers were afraid of that would happen, is that we would turn it into an us against them thing, and that's where we are.
Mm-hmm. So how is it that I'm allowed to be independent? I can say that I'm independent. I'm not Democrat, not Republican. I can be independent until that ballot is put before me, and then it says you have to choose. And then when I'm like, what? And they said, well, you have to choose depending on especially if it's during a presidential election, whichever of the two candidates that you're going for, that's then what my ballot has to look like. And I'm like, but what if I could be voting for a Democrat president, but I could be voting for other folks who are Republican on this, but I don't have that option. I'm just saying for the state of Georgia, and I'm not sure how all the other states look, but I recalled when I was in California voting that I could see all the candidates both, on both sides, and I then had the freedom to select, because there were certain Republican candidates that I wanted to vote for certain positions, and Democrats for these positions, and Libertarians, you know what I mean? Like, how is it that I don't know. And the thing is, how is this legal, fair? I know it's not ethical. How is this legal that we can then isolate in these columns, these silos that then prevent you have to then be straight down this party line, and that's it. There's no other options.
Well, you're talking about in the primary, but the problem is, and this is a perfect example. One of the things that hurt me in this primary was that about 36-37% of the people in this congressional district are unaffiliated. Mm. So, and here's what happens. So the people who are, and many of them are right-leaning unaffiliated. Mm-hmm. So a lot of the folks who are right-leaning unaffiliated voters will pull a Democratic ballot. Mm-hmm. When they vote in the primary, and they will vote for the people they want to run against. Wow. They will nominate and that's kind of what happened in our congressional races. That a lot of those folks, because the guy that won the primary has got so much baggage in his background, and I begged people in the primary, do your research, and they didn't do it. And so a lot of the right-wing people voted for the person they wanted to run against. So you can pick your opponent, basically.
Got you.
Now, I mean, that's not the entire picture, but that's another flaw in the system. And you're right. So if you're unaffiliated, you have to pick a Democratic ballot or you have to pick a Republican ballot. Well, why? I'm neither of those. Why should I have to do that? And again, I think that's a flaw in the election process.
Yeah, and it's like, because that means then I'm not picking who I feel is the right candidates. You're telling me these are your only options. And so that means that if I don't vote for someone, then the other candidates are going to are getting votes from this side. This other person's not getting any votes, because it's so skewed. It's so maddening, because I'm like,
it is.
It's just, and the thing is that I understand that it works in the best interest of the status quo and those that are supporting that status quo. Which that's why I have issues that business people, these corporations, have so much influence as far as using their money, because it's so weird, because in business we are so about disrupting the status quo, where it's always about this change and bringing about change, but yet you turn around and the hypocrisy is that you're reinforcing your own status quo on the side to just make sure that your interests are met. It's like, I just don't like that this puppet mastery of this manipulation that's going on, because it literally everything that we teach, we do the exact opposite.
Well, no, but to be fair, there are a lot of big organizations out there that are not doing that. They're socially responsible. They have a big I know Apple has about $300 billion in cash. They're doing a lot of socially responsible, progressive things in terms of racial equality and pay equality and that sort of thing, and other companies. And then there are many companies that don't, and you see a lot of that on social media, where I think the Goya CEO made a comment the other day, and now people are boycotting Goya Foods because of what he said. So it can go the other way too. Mm-hmm. And we can hold those companies accountable for those kinds of policies. The My Pillow guy's a big Trumpster. Now people are saying don't buy My Pillow, and you see a list of all the companies that give money to Trump, like Wendy's and so on. So you can be socially responsible corporately, but you can also turn people off with your political views or your political donations, and they can impact business too. So you have to be careful of both ends of that.
Yeah. And I think that's just kind of like the thing is that when you're aware of that, then you make a conscious decision as to, okay, if these are the values that then we have to always align with those values. And in doing so, then that means that we may have to make a choice that we won't involve ourselves in the politics on that end. We will do our part to be socially responsible for the people, and because those people are, the consumers, but we'll keep our hands out of this because we can't ethically, support the decisions that we're going to make. Like, we can't justify it. We can try to rationalize, but we can't really justify it based on our value system that we say that we live by.
Right.
So I'm interested in seeing how things unfold, but I'm hoping that, there's a lot of, small business owners that, ask me different questions, and that you can see the fear in people's eyes because they're not sure, because no one taught them about crisis management. No one taught them about failing. And so now that they're either facing failure or they have failed as far as this is concerned in their life, they're traumatized by it. And so but as I wrap this up with you, what would you say to the small business owner that's right now, like I met this woman at Piedmont Park just last week. She had to close her restaurant. She had a restaurant for years, and now what she's done is she has She has reimagined her business, so she's going to be doing catering, but she was out there at Piedmont Park selling these natural, sugar-free, there's no sugar added, there's nothing added to these
cool.
juices, these little juices that she created, these bottles of juice, which were amazing. But there are a lot of people that aren't thinking like her. They're not reimagining their businesses. They're just sitting here like on a toilet and not sure what to do. So
yeah, looking at Twitter. Yeah. Well, one of the positives from this whole pandemic episode is, and it's kind of ironic too, but if you go back a year or two or three, many people were asking, hey, we have all this technology now. Why can't I work from home? Or college students or high school students, or why can't I take this class online? Or why can't I work from home? Or why can't I do this remotely? Or, why don't we do takeout at this restaurant? Or, those sorts of things. No, well, we can't do that. Mm-hmm. And now magically, they're doing that. Ta-da! Because they've been forced in the position where you have to do that now. But it can't be done. But they said it couldn't be done, and now they're doing it. Mm-hmm. And so I like your idea of reimagining. And we've had, I know we have a small bakery here in town, and they expanded their menu where they prepare like a family dinner every night for takeout. So you can call in an order and just swing by and pick it up just to get some cash flow. And of course, in a small community like this one, people really try to bend over backwards to support the local small businesses as well, to try to keep them going. One of the things that a lot of small businesses are doing are pushing gift certificates. Buy a gift certificate now. You can use it when we open back up, or when we can get you in here with no more than 10 people or that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So at least they have some cash flow going in, and you're still giving them some business, even if you can't go actually get the service right now. So gift certificates would be used down the road to keep them afloat, short term. There's a lot of things that can be done, but I mean, sometimes we've had a lot of 4 of the major little hot restaurant bar spots in Asheville have closed permanently. They were very popular, and just like they just can't do it, and it's unfortunate. But there again, if you go back to the PPP program that was supposed to help those small businesses, and Congress allocated, I can't remember the numbers, an ungodly amount of money that allocated for small business to keep them afloat during this episode. But a big portion of that money went to big companies when it was supposed to go to the smaller business that really needed it. And now the government is not being transparent in terms of how that money was allocated. So there again, it went to some of the companies owned by the big donors and political friends instead of the frontline small businesses on Main Street that really needed that help to keep their staff paid or to keep their doors open during this pandemic. And again, it's the influence of money mm-hmm. that causes those bad decisions to be made. A lot of people are going to really feel that pain for a long time. And some businesses have closed permanently. And so then in that case, you have to just look at that as an opportunity to, hey, it didn't work. Let's try something else. Mm-hmm. Sometimes things happen for a reason. And a friend of mine told me once, when God closes a door, just don't keep banging on it. Just go find another door. And maybe that's what you have to do.
You're just waiting for it to reopen. It's like,
yeah.
There's 3 other doors that have opened all this while you've been banging on this one particular one.
Exactly.
Well, Steve, so can you share again when your TED Talk is, and so that everyone can be ready, and of course, leading up to. So I'm going to have other conversations with you because that's too far from now to November. So we're going to have other conversations about other things that are going to be coming up because. Of course, there's always going to be something that's going to happen in this world.
It's always something.
So,
anytime. Let me know anytime.
So
I'd love to talk to you.
So the TED Talk is in November. Can you give the details again?
Yeah, it's in Lake Junaluska, western North Carolina, and it's going to be, the topic is a systems approach to the coronavirus.
Awesome.
So we're going to take, basically what I've done is I've taken several of the Peter Singate systems laws, and we're going to look at how they were applied or misapplied, and the results of that, and then what we can learn from that going forward, both to help resolve this one, because it's probably going to spike again around this, October, November. Mm-hmm. And then what we can learn from this one to react better to the next pandemic that comes up, because a lot of countries have recovered. I think I saw New Zealand today is pretty much back to normal because they jumped on it right away and did the right thing and handled it. We have not, and it's going to keep getting worse, and we need to learn from that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Because it's going to happen again, and I would not be surprised in. I think I actually played golf yesterday with a guy who's a kidney specialist, and he said there are already a couple of mutations of the COVID-19 that are floating around out there. So it's gonna evolve, and by the time we find a vaccine in 6 months to 9 months to a year, this particular version of it's probably going to have mutated to where that vaccine may not even be effective. So we got to be a lot more proactive.
Yeah. Well, when I'm going to call you back in a little bit, I'm going to finish up wrapping up here, and I'm going to call you back in a little bit so we can finish catching up and shooting the breeze. But I want to thank you for joining me here. And of course, as I said, we'll have future conversations on the podcast so that people can learn and be able to connect with you. Can you share your social media handles right before I let you go?
Yeah, Twitter is at Steve Woodsmall, and we're on Facebook, Dr. Steve Woodsmall.
Awesome. All right, Steve, so I'm going to call you back shortly.
All right. Always a pleasure, Josh.
Likewise. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, bye. All right, everyone. So that is Dr. Steve Woodsmall. As I said, I could have continued on and on having a conversation with him. I'm definitely going to have Steve back on this podcast so that we can really be able to get to the nitty gritty of some other topics. And I think what I'll also do is open up opportunities for you all to provide questions for Steve so that he can be able to answer some of those questions, and we could be able to have a different approach to that. So before we leave out, I want to make sure that you guys are connected with us on social media. So, it's time to wrap up. We're going to go our separate ways. Make sure if you have any questions or suggestions that you guys reach out to us. Send us an email at don'tcallitsmallbiz@gmail.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Foreman LLC, as well as Twitter. And our podcast for Twitter, our podcast Twitter handles is It Ain't Small. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn at Natasha L. Foreman. Reach out, tell me hello, share your story. Our show, I want to give credit for the show's theme song. It's called Higher Up. It's by Shane Ivers. I want to thank all of you for tuning in to the Don't Call It Small Business Podcast, for sharing these episodes with others, and for your continued support. And don't forget what I tell you on each and every episode. Don't call what you're planning, thinking, dreaming, or doing little or small. Go big, go bold, or go nowhere. I'll see you here for our next episode.